Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. Yeah.
The views expressed by J. Michael McCoy are the views of the hosts and guests of Max World Live, and not necessarily the views of Webcast One Live, its staff, its management, the cleaning crew, Dave the electric guy, the guy who cleans the skywalk, the woman who brought in the cookies, the management staff of Hubble Real Estate, the parking lot attendant at Keck Parking, the wait staff over at Miss Kitty's, the coffee crew at Frederick's, the man in the street corner willing to work for food, Rob Spearman, Max Crabb, or anyone else of sound mind. Should you be offended, provoked, intimidated, shocked, confused, or just made to think independently, log on to MaxWorldLive.com right now. It's your voice we want to hear in Max World. And now, live from the palatial studios of Webcast One Live, your host, J. Michael McCoy.
Thank you, Michael Libby. 4 minutes after the hour on this fourth day of March in the Lord's year 2014. I'm J. Michael McCoy, and this is the Tuesday edition of Max World. My co-host Tom Coates standing by, my producer Ryan in the house, and we're very honored to have senatorial candidate Mark Jacobs in the house today. And Mark, we appreciate you coming by today.
Mac, thanks for having me on. Great to be here.
You bet. Love to have you here. And I'm just going to turn it over to Tom because he's got a plethora of questions.
All right. Good.
And we don't have the phones open today because we have Mark for a short period of time, so we want to utilize those questions that Tom has prepared.
Mark, we've had some of the other candidates been in here. We've had Sam, we've had Matt. We were delighted that you joined us today. Can you give us, from your perspective, a little bit of a synopsis of the race, a little bit of a thumbnail on some of the other candidates in the race? How do you see it at this point?
Well, Tom, it's a very interesting situation here. This is the first open U.S. Senate seat that we've had in 40 years since I was 11 years old. And I think really represents a historic opportunity for our state to select its next United States Senator. As you mentioned, we've got a number of folks in the Republican primary. There's 6 of us in total, all good people that I've gotten to know throughout the process here. But I think, one of the things that's a little different about me is that I've not been involved in politics before. I'm a business guy, and, with that bring a business perspective. But I'm very concerned that we're on the wrong track from the country standpoint here. And one of the statistics I look at is the fact that the number of families on food stamps has nearly doubled over the last 5 years. And I think that, to me, is a clear sign that opportunity to live the American dream, to live a better life, it's not working for a lot of families. And I think that, when I look at it, that's the very principle that has made America the great country that it is today, that this has always been a place where if you worked hard, you could, earn a better life for yourself.
Is it not working here in America, or do we have too many families working America, working the system to try to get something for nothing?
Well, I think, I think those are related questions, Mac, but I think the fact is when you look at the statistics, 58.8% of Americans today have a full-time job. That's 4.5% lower than it was in 2007, and there is no way that we're going to get to a balanced budget to solve all these other problems that we have when we have a small percentage of Americans working, paying taxes, and higher percentages of people that aren't.
Yeah, and that Mac beat me to my follow-up on this. You can look at the food stamps situation. You can draw different conclusions. One of the conclusions that I draw is that this particular administration has gone out of their way to try to expand dependency in this country. We look at the loosening of standards for people that want to get federal disability, and that's significantly expanded. The opportunity to get into the welfare hammock has significantly expanded. The food stamps is obviously a very pressing one. We've gone from less than 30 to 48 million recipients in this country on food stamps, and they've significantly increased the amount of food stamps that there are. I guess I'm cynical enough, Mark, to think that this particular administration and the entire Democratic Party is made up of a group of redistribution socialists that would like nothing more than to expand the dependency model because once that's done, they have a great number of votes that they didn't have before. I'm not even going to ask you to answer that, but okay, let's say a year from now, Mark, you're successful. You've been out running hard. We've heard the ads. We're looking at the landscape. Let's say a year from now, you're in the U.S. Senate. What are going to be your top maybe 2 or 3 priorities, and how are you going to set about handling those things?
Well, Tom, I think the core problem we have in this country today is a lack of good jobs. And you know this, that we went through a very deep economic downturn in 2008. Our recovery, even if you want to call it that, has been incredibly slow to that. And again, I think that's what has led to the budget deficit situations that we have today, the growing number of people that are on government support programs. And I think we need to, as I said, create an environment here where more jobs can be created. Now,
Okay,
to
so
be
that's
absolutely clear,
your number one priority then.
number one priority is creating more jobs. And I just to be clear, I think that the government doesn't create jobs and economic growth. That's the private sector that does that. But I do think that the government can create an environment in which those jobs can be created. And when I look at the policies of this administration that have been gone along with by Congressman Braley, it's very clear to me that every step along the way, we are making it more difficult for the private sector to grow. One of the things I'll tell you is I'm a very solutions-oriented problem solver. And when I joined this race right before Thanksgiving, there's 5 priorities that I have that I think it's going to take to get the economy going again. And just to touch on those briefly, first on that is education, with a particular emphasis on community colleges and vocational schools. One of the challenges I saw, I previously was CEO of a large electric power company by the name of Reliant Energy. We struggled to find skilled craftsmen, to find Boilermakers, to find welders, and these are very good paying jobs. And I hear that from employers all across the state here, that they struggle to find people that have the right skills. Nationwide, there's 4 million jobs that are unfilled today because employers cannot find people with the right skills. And I would rather, as I said, provide a helping hand for those who need it, that are trying to acquire, job training skills at community colleges, at vocational schools. I would rather give them a helping hand to get that education so that they can get a better paying job than I would for us to continue to pay welfare and unemployment.
All right,
And
so
I'm
you're
a big
talking about
believer.
federally subsidizing that level of blue-collar education, that there is a void, and I agree with it that there is a void. One of the issues that has cropped up, you mentioned education, that has been discussed by some of your competition in this race, is the issue of Common Core. Do you have any thoughts on pro or con Common Core?
Well, I do, and thank you for asking. My view is that the K-12 education is a state and local issue. I am against the federal government dictating to the states what children should learn. I'm against the federal government using race to the top grant dollars to induce states to do that. But I tell you what I am for, which is accountability in our schools. And I think we can get that by having a rigorous set of standards that are adopted at the state level, and by building accountability into the system. And I think that's one of the things that is missing out there today.
State by state or federally mandated?
Oh, no. I think that should absolutely be a state by state. Again, I really don't see a role for the federal government in the K-12 education piece. And in fact, if you look at the budget that the Department of Education has today, about $70 billion, and you divide that by the number of K-12 students in the country, that would translate into about $1,340 per student. Now, imagine if we just took half of those dollars and we block granted those to states, and we had another $670 per student in the state of Iowa. I can promise you that would translate into a lot more achievement in the classroom gains than what we get from the Department of Education.
Would you favor what Reagan tried to do, to try to dismantle the Department of Education?
Well, I think that's something we could look at. There are some services there that, as I said, we'd have to
He put
reallocate.
Bill
to other
Bennett in there specifically to try to dismantle it, and then the Democratic Congress eventually figured out what he was doing and stopped him.
Right. Understand. I think the key point here is, though, that the K-12 education I see as a state and local issue. And I would go one further and say that I think that the curriculum ought to be developed at a local school or a school district level, how you're going to teach children, because the reality is that every school district is different. They have different resources in terms of teachers, different students that they're trying to educate. But from a federal standpoint, I do think it is that appropriate. I'd like to see us provide that helping hand. I'm a big believer in the hand up versus the handout. We were talking about that government dependency, and
Right.
there's some great research on the topic. A book that is entitled "When Helping Hurts," that gets into the idea of well-intentioned people that try to help others, and sometimes that helping can hurt when you take away somebody's motivation to be self-sufficient.
Okay. So you believe that the creating jobs is a top priority. You mentioned education. You're a businessman. How important do you see the debt situation at the federal level? And I'm not just talking about the $17 trillion in debt that often is talked about. The bigger piece of this puzzle that often isn't, I think, is the unfunded entitlements. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, now Obamacare, the $4 trillion sitting on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, things that the people aren't even talking about, but at some point come due. And the Federal Reserve, Mark, has had this policy going back to Alan Greenspan, artificially lowering the rate of interest, ostensibly to spur the economy, to create more consumer spending and borrowing and so on and so forth, at the expense of the savers in this country. They have not been given a reasonable savings rate. But that aside, if we ever return to the point that we saw back in the 70s, how old a man are you?
51.
51. Okay, I'm a little older than you are. I moved down to Midland. I moved down to Midland, Texas back in 1981. And bought a home on I had good credit, and I paid 18 3/4% interest down in Midland, Texas. Bush was an oil man back in those days. Refinanced a few years later at 13.5% interest. Now, if we ever return to those days that Paul Volcker said, let's get rid of this inflation, and we have any kind of interest rate, how is the government itself going to be able to finance its debt, much less the American people? I mean, we are in this fantasy land that apparently never ends. I want to get your take on some of these things and the Federal Reserve role in this whole process.
Well, Tom, I share your concern here with our fiscal situation, and you're absolutely right. With the Federal Reserve has had a very accommodating monetary policy that's helped keep artificially low interest rates, and but that would have a very significant impact on our federal budget. Each 1% increase in interest rates are going to translate into about $170 billion a year of added interest expense. It's interesting. Earlier in my career, 2002, I was brought in to be chief financial officer of a company by the name of Reliant Energy. Mm-hmm. And the day I walked in the front door at that company, it owed over $8.5 billion of debt. 6.5 of that was due in the next 12 months. The company was under federal investigation from having been involved in the California energy trading crisis. The financials had to be restated because of sham energy trading. And in short, anything that could have gone wrong had gone wrong in that company. And the group of banks that had lent the company money had lost confidence in the leadership of the company, and they were poised to step in and take over control. And I said, I am not going to let this company fail when I walked in. And I had a couple principles I would not negotiate upon. Number one, I wasn't going to settle for a short-term solution. And the second thing, I wasn't going to hand over control of the company to the banks. But I listened to them, and I worked with them. And ultimately, we were able to come up with an alternative plan that was better for the company. And it also turned out to be pretty good for that group of banks as well, because we had a group of banks that stepped up with a $6.2 billion rescue financing package. They got repaid every penny that they were owed in less than 2 years, and we protected thousands of jobs. So I know what it's like to inherit a fiscal mess, and more importantly, have learned in the private sector how to bring people together to solve those problems.
Mark Jacobs wants your vote. He's running for Senate. We'll hear more from him next, live on Max World, here on KTIA, Iowa.
If you choose to obey the power of sin, it leads to death. If you choose to obey obedience, it leads to righteousness.
Forgiveness is just the beginning of life in Christ. God wants us to live for Him now.
And because of Jesus Christ, the gospel was preached, and you and I are blessed today because of Abraham. Did you know that? We're blessed.
Experience Truth, 99.3 FM.
All across America, there are countless numbers of people struggling with addiction and other life-controlling issues. Probably someone you know and love. There is a way out. There is hope. Transformations Treatment Center in Delray Beach, Florida, has a unique approach to substance abuse treatment. Call now and ask about our Guaranteed Success program or log on to transformationstreatment.com. Transformations. Change your life. Change your relationships. Transform your world.
Yes, now your favorite programs on Webcast One Live can all be watched and listened to on any Android or Apple device. Your phone, tablet, or iPad. Yes, your favorite shows on Webcast One Live are available live or on podcast wherever you go. Let me introduce to you some of our great shows.
Shalom! Every week on Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman, we'll talk about issues in the Middle East, issues related to the Jewish tradition and religious traditions in general, and keep you up to date on exactly what's going on around the world. You may know some of the story, but you haven't heard all of the story until you've heard it on Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman and our special guests we have on every week.
Hey, this is Doc with Doc and Lefty. I want to tell you about our brand new time slot. It's from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. It's on the same night, Tuesdays. We now follow Ed Fallon and the Fallon Forum on webcast1live.com. I want to tell you a little bit about our show. Our show is focused on local, state, and national, and sometimes international politics. We like to keep people updated and informed. We also have very interesting guests. So please join us every Tuesday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. on webcast1live.com.
So when you want to watch your favorite Webcast One program, remember, there's an app for that. You know, there's an app for that.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Minutes after the hour on this fourth day of March in the Lord's year 2014. I'm J. Michael McCoy, and this is the Tuesday edition of Max World Live, and we've got Mark Jacobs, candidate for United States Senate, in the studio today with Tom Coates, and kind of had to stop you on that last break, so continue with your thought process on finances.
Okay, and prior to the break, Mark, you gave us a good background, I'm glad you did, in regards to your own personal situation with your business interest and what happened with the energy company when you came in and the massive amount of debt. It sounded like a huge amount, billions of dollars, and how you worked that through. But we got shorted to the point that you were going to say how that background and that experience will translate into you moving into a position in the U.S. Senate and helping us navigate what I think are eventually going to become very troubled waters with the debt and the interest rates eventually having to go some higher.
Yeah, and Tom, and again, it's an incredibly important issue here, the fiscal issues. And, the point I was making, I know what it's like to inherit a fiscal mess, and more importantly, I've learned in the private sector how to bring people together to solve those problems. The first thing we need to do is we need to get to a balanced budget, and I support the idea of a balanced budget amendment to do that today with a stair step down to get to a balanced budget. over a prescribed period of time. I have come to the conclusion that our elected leaders in Washington are incapable of doing that on their own, and we need that type of structural provision in there to make sure that we have a balance.
Something like the Paul Ryan plan, perhaps?
Well, and again, I would prefer to see an amendment that requires by law Congress to get to a balanced budget within a prescribed period of time. Then I think you go about the hard work of saying, what do you do? And, a lot of the lessons I learned at Reliant, I think, are absolutely directly applicable to what can be done here. One of the first things we did at Reliant is we got rid of a lot of wasteful and inefficient spending. Our federal government today, 15% of Medicare reimbursements are fraudulent. That's $90 billion a year. I'll tell you, I have had my credit card number stolen 3 times in the last 12 months. The last time when I used it at Target. And every single time, though, my credit card company caught the fraudulent charge on the very first charge for a net loss of 0. So the know-how exists in the private sector to root out fraud. What we need to do is we need to bring that to our federal government to eliminate fraudulent spending. I think for people that are cheating the system and cheating our federal government out of money, we ought to be aggressively going after those people and throwing the book at them. Second thing we need to do here is we need to move for more efficiency in our federal government. And one of the things we did at Reliant was we re-engineered all of our processes to deliver better results at lower cost. And I think we can do that by taking the administrative piece of the government. Now, I'm not talking about dollars going out to programs or to benefits, but the cost of the government doing business. I would like to see an across-the-board 10% cut in that to basically force the prioritization and improvement in the public processes. We do need to address the entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicare. I think we have a sacred obligation for our seniors at retirement age or anywhere close to retirement age. But I think we have some opportunities to go back and look at how can we tweak some of those programs to...
Would you eventually have to further expand the retirement age Social Security from where it is and is going to a more aggressive policy? I mean, you can't let people retire. Back when the 65 was set, Mark, you probably knows, back in FDR's period, the average U.S. citizen didn't live to be 65.
Right.
And it's a lot different today because the average American's getting out closer to 80. So just from an actuarial standpoint, the idea that allowing everyone to retire at 65 is actuarially unsound.
Well, and I think that's something, Tom, we absolutely ought to look at of how can we make sure that those programs remain solvent, and people that are paying money into those programs today, there's going to be dollars there for them when they do reach retirement age, whatever that be. And then I think we also need to tackle the debt, and that's a little bit different issue. We do have $17 trillion in debt, and again, if you add, as you mentioned, some of these unfunded liabilities, it's a substantially larger number. One of the things we did when I was at Reliant is we sold non-core assets to help provide a down payment on our debt. And our federal government today is very asset rich. There are a tremendous amount of oil and gas reserves that are sitting on federal lands. I believe that we ought to be selling the mineral rights to those and fast-tracking the permitting process, and I think that can raise significant funds today, one-time funds that we can use to pay down debt. None of this stuff is rocket science. It's all stuff I've done before in the business world. But again, I don't hear, even from the Republican Party, a lot of conversation about what can we do to tackle the debt today.
Okay. Mac, I know you had something you want to ask him.
I don't want to throw Tom Harkin under the bus because he's done a good job. So let's talk about
what?
Come on, I just don't want to make waves here. I'm trying to be nice. So the
it turned a first a fortune into nothing, into $20 million. He's done a good job at that, Mac.
Okay, Scrooge McDuck. His office. What will you do better with that office to serve the people of Iowa than has been done previously? So directly look at bills and laws that Harkin has championed that, or not championed, that you think Iowans will be better served by you.
Well, a couple things I'd point to, Mac. I think number one of the things I learned as a leader is leadership starts with listening. And when I ran Reliant, the company had 38 power plants from New Jersey to California. I found I learned the most when I spent time in the company's power plant, speaking directly to the front line of the organization, the control room operators, the mechanics, the people who were doing the real work. And I always asked a lot of questions. One of them was, what can I do to help you do your job better? And I found when I asked that question, people would open up and tell me what they really felt like. And it was one of the reasons that we were able to break down a lot of the bureaucracy and red tape. So it starts with listening to people here in Iowa. I think Senator Grassley's done a tremendous job of visiting every county every year and hosting a town hall meetings. I think those are very important. It's not something I would just do because it's what Senator Grassley does, but it's something I've already done in my business career, getting out and listening to the front lines of the organization. The second thing I would do is the other part of the job of being a legislator is taking the ideas and principles that you know can help your constituents and turning those into concrete results. And I think that's where we have a real skill gap today in Washington. In my experience, it is easy to work with people who share your point of view. It's much more difficult to work with people who have different points of view, yet still get done what you want to get done in a way that's consistent with your principles and values. And that is the art of leadership. And I don't see many people in Washington today that are able to do that. And, I'm prepared to tackle the deficits and debt that we have in this country, and I'm prepared to work with leaders in both parties to take on those issues. And I would hope that there's areas like the fraudulent spending that I mentioned earlier, making our government more efficient. I would hope there are areas like that we could find bipartisan support to get things done.
Mark Jacobs is our guest today, a candidate for United States Senator. Talk to me like I'm a 6-year-old for just a minute. You're on record, and you can deny this if you want, but you're on record as saying you support cap and trade. What I know of cap and trade, I could not support it. But talk to me like I'm a 6-year-old and explain to me why I should be okay with cap and trade.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the opportunity to clarify my position on that. Personally, I've never supported any form of carbon legislation. Now, I was CEO of a large energy company, an energy company that had 11 coal-fired power plants that was going to be very negatively impacted by any type of carbon dioxide legislation. I had a responsibility to the men and women that worked in our company. I had a responsibility to our customers that relied on us for affordable energy. And my decision was I can either be involved in the debate or I can sit on the sidelines. And I chose to be involved in the debate and help push this to a place that was the least damaging place it could have gone to. And then thankfully, it died in the Senate, and we never had that. Energy is something I feel very strong about. It's one of the ways that we can grow our economy. And, there's no question that a cap and trade or any other form of carbon dioxide legislation pushes us in a position of making our energy more expensive and stunting the job growth. We've seen that in America here over the last decade, that tens of thousands of new jobs have been created as we've developed new energy sources. And right here in Iowa, with the development of the renewable fuels industry, we've added 2,600 jobs directly and another 60,000 indirectly.
All right, so when one of my journalist friends tells me that you support cap and trade, I should say back to them, no, he doesn't. He may want health care reform, but he doesn't support Obamacare. He may not want cap and trade as Obama wants it or the Democrats wants it, but you want to be involved in that conversation so it doesn't get out of hand.
Absolutely. And back at that time when those comments that you're referencing, Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House, and the House of Representatives was going to pass a form of carbon dioxide legislation. It was not a matter of if, it was a matter of what. And again, I had a responsibility to be involved in that debate and help guide that to a place that was going to be least damaging.
Mark, if you were in the United States Senate today, what would you tell the president about this Ukraine situation? What's our job here, as far as you're concerned?
Well, I think the situation in the Ukraine is the culmination, what we're seeing now, of a incredibly weak position of leadership that our president has adopted. We have been
I
leading.
love the cartoon somebody put online today that Putin says, now, is that a red line or a pink line? I can't quite see
Well, I
it.
love the one the Register
I'm not
had
sure it
today,
matters.
where there were two parts to it. One was the off-mic conversation caught between Obama
And Putin.
About Putin, and he
Okay.
said, "Tell Vlad that give me a little room because after the election I have more flexibility." And the next one shows Vlad in a tank running over the top of a flattened out Obama and says, "I'm not."
But I think the situation that we're seeing, we've seen developed in the last week or 10 days, is really the result of what has been a weak, incoherent foreign policy that this administration has pursued. President Obama stepped back and let the European Union take the lead on some of the negotiations with the Ukraine. And I think we're paying the price for that today. And honestly, as I said, I think we see that weak form of leadership in our foreign policy that's absolutely translated into domestic policy as well.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the reasons that our economy is in such difficult position now, is we just have not had good leadership in the White House.
No question about that, Mark. Now, a lot of our listeners are conservative Christians. One of the big things that they want to hear is, where do you stand on life? And in what, if any, circumstances would you countenance abortion?
Well, we are a Christian family, Tom, and accordingly, I am pro-life. I recognize that can be a deeply difficult decision, and the only exceptions that I could be comfortable with are in the instances where the life of the mother was at risk or rape or incest.
Okay.
All right, we're going to take a break here, and when we come back, you mentioned you have 5 points, right?
I do.
Priorities.
Yes.
And I've got 5 written down already, and I don't think you got to all of them. So before we end up, I want to make sure we've got all those written down and any other clarifications we need to make. By the way, for my pro-choice friends, I tell them I'm pro-choice too. I think you should choose to keep your legs shut before you're ready to have a baby. Now, as a senatorial candidate, I expect you to clean that up a little bit, but so I can be pro-choice too. You, Tom?
I'm pro-choice. I prefer to choose the life option.
We're coming back live here on KTIA.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wonderscheid.
I'm administrative manager
I am the senior technician
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
If we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, I mean, it's your home.
It's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're gonna do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's gonna be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're gonna do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed right or it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring that we exceed your expectations. And if for whatever reason we'd fail and we can't make it right, we guarantee all of those guarantees with a 100% money back guarantee.
I mean, if you don't think that your technician can fix it right, are you gonna say that to a client? No.
You don't have to worry about having a technician come to your house.
We drug test, background check all of our team members. We put safe people in your home. Each and every one of our service techs, 400 hours a year in training.
You tell it the minute they walk in the door. They know what they're doing, they've done their homework, and they actually truly care about what you want.
Because at the end of the day, you're the person that makes sure I have a job.
They're gonna be listening. They're gonna wanna know what your challenges are. Then they're gonna come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did my job right that day.
Well, when it comes to your comfort, safety, and your family, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it, because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? I mean, you can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me. But is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there, they're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going, though. I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm going to take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
I mean, fixed right or it's free or 100% money back.
enough said.
Okay, 22 before the top. Salem Radio Network News at 4, and then at 4:03, Michael Mudloff from Westkirk Presbyterian Church and True Blue. We're honored to have Mark Jacobs in the house tonight. He's seeking your vote for the United States Senate. And there's no better way than to figure out what you think of this guy or any candidate is to listen to the conversations they have with us. Tom Coates lets no fat hang easy. He asks the tough questions, and you've got another one, so go for it.
We've got two social issues, and you answer the one you get very simply and concisely, and I appreciate that. Here's the other one. Many of the conservative Christians that listen to this show also have the other issue of gay marriage, and it's a burning social issue. Nobody wants to go as far as what the left wants to describe conservatives as going, trying to stamp out homosexuality in our society. But what's your position on gay marriage, and at what point do you say, here's my line? We hear a lot of lines from Obama, and they get crossed on a regular basis. Where's your line? What will you say is acceptable today, tomorrow, and in the future?
Yeah, well, Tom, as I mentioned, we're a Christian family. I believe in traditional marriage between one man and one woman.
Now, I want to put my 2 cents in here. Here's my fear. My fear, and this will probably happen in your Senate lifetime, should you be elected. My fear is that far left agenda, and whoever you want to call it, LGBT, you want to call it liberals, progressives, I don't care what you call them, but they're opposite of you and me. What they really want is they want the Word of God to become hate speech. That if we stand and we read Timothy or we read Mark or we read Paul's letters to the Corinthians or Romans or whoever he's writing to that says, you just don't do that. Men don't lay with men and women don't lay with women. That when we speak that, when our pastor speaks that, or you and I speak it on this radio, we'll be arrested, and the Word of God will be hate speech. That's what I'm afraid. I'm not afraid of Bob and Brad getting married. That's Jesus' thing. But what about that when the government comes by and says, I'm going to take you away from your wife and kids and put you in jail because you read the Word of God?
Well, I'm very concerned about the free exercise of religion. That was one of the founding principles of this country. There's no question that's been under assault. And that's something I feel very strongly about standing up and defending because that is a core part of who we are as a country and who we are as a people.
Yeah, we really can't lose that.
Well, we say that, guys, but, we're losing it quickly. Don't ask, don't tell became the law of the land under Bill Clinton. And they said, well, that's not enough. Now in fact, I read just this last week, there was an open celebration with the gay soldiers. It's fine to say I believe in traditional marriage, but, if the issue comes up in the U.S. Senate and you're going to vote for something like open practice of homosexuality. Mac mentioned the doing away with the priest in the military, the things that you may well have a vote on at some point. What do you think is good and what's not good?
Well, again, that's Tom, I don't want to get into hypotheticals about what votes might come up with. Again, I've made my position clear that personally I believe a marriage is between one man and one woman. I think what we ought to be focused on here, as I mentioned, is, how do we create an economic environment in this country to create more opportunities for people? And, that's what I see today as the root cause of the problems we got in this country.
Yeah, and you started by priorities. Was jobs one of them?
Well,
Yeah,
jobs,
is the first one you
that's my
mentioned.
top priority. And again, the things to get there, Mac, would be we talked about education with a focus on that. We talked about continuing to increase energy production in America, opening up more of our federal lands and waters to exploration. That can continue to add thousands of new jobs and help keep energy prices low, which drives economic growth in other areas.
By the way, no concerns with fracking?
I think we need to make sure we do it in a environmentally responsible manner, but technology has advanced so far in the last decade that I'm comfortable in our ability to do that. We need to make sure we have the right oversight on that. But I think, again, the fracking technology has added greatly to the economic standing that we have today.
Okay.
Excessive government regulations is number 3. One specific idea I have on that, we have the Congressional Budget Office, which is a nonpartisan group that does a analysis of any new piece of legislation. I think we need the same type of nonpartisan, independent cost-benefit analysis for any new government regulation. And this is something I saw as CEO of a large energy company. I had a lot of dealings with the EPA, and I can tell you firsthand that when they do their own cost-benefit analysis, it is biased to support whatever agenda that they have, and we need some independence in that. Fourth is tax policy. We have a tax policy today in this country that discourages new investment, and it encourages companies to locate jobs and factories overseas, and that's wrong. We need a tax policy here that is encouraging of new investment in our country and will help us get these jobs back on shore. And the last point here is Obamacare. And I don't think there's any...
Okay, before you go to Obamacare, tax policy. Would you go essentially with the national sales tax, the fair tax, or would you go more with the Forbes simplified income tax?
Well, there's a lot I like about the national sales tax type of approach. It's far simpler than what we have today, and I think that's something I want to continue to look at for the intermediate and longer term. I think in the near term, there's some things that we can do to bring down our marginal tax rates on job-creating businesses and to eliminate some of the special interest loopholes that we have in the tax code.
So a flatter tax?
I think a flatter tax that has less loopholes in it on job-creating businesses is something that makes a lot of sense to me. Okay. And then the last point on Obamacare, the Congressional Budget Office came out, in the last week or two with statistics that's going to result in 2.5 million less people employed. That's moving. It continues to move us in exactly the wrong direction of fewer people working, paying taxes.
But they're going to defer it until 2016.
If only it were that easy.
What is the health care resolution that we should be working towards?
I think the core problem we have in healthcare is the continued escalation in costs. Today, it represents 1/6 of our economy. In fact, I was...
but 1/6 of us are old. But seriously, I mean...
Well, it used to be less than 10%.
Yeah.
And so it's grown to that level. But, I think the problem with rising healthcare cost is that squeezing our families, and it puts a tremendous strain on the federal budget deficit. In fact, I was in north central Iowa not long ago, and I met with a county auditor up there. And she told me a story that I've heard from Iowans all over the state, that her take-home pay has gone down every year for the last 4 or 5 years because her part of healthcare contributions have gone up faster than her raises. And that's a story, as I said, that's really hurting families all over. Look, at one level, look at it. We've had, 4 million people sign up on this plan? The whole purpose of Obamacare was to cover the uninsured. We have 44 million people uninsured in this country, and the administration is celebrating 4 million now that have signed up, and a lot of these...
But how many have lost? I mean, I think there's many lost as have gained here.
Absolutely, and so this isn't even doing what it was designed to do. It's resulting in reduced hours, lost wages for people, higher premiums, in some cases the outright cancellation of insurance. So we need to repeal Obamacare. We need a fundamentally different approach.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Obama to stand up and tell the people of Ukraine that if you want to keep your country, you can keep your country. And see how that works for him.
Exactly right.
Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you getting out there and making it tough. I honor you. I couldn't do what you want to do. I mean, I can sit behind this mic and complain, and I can talk to guys like you who can go out there and make a difference, but That's not what Jesus wants me to do. So you go get him, Tiger.
Well, you know what? It's a real calling that I think people that enter into this receive. And again, I love this country. I love this state. I've had some great experiences that I think can be very useful in tackling some of the problems we have in this country. And I think we need people with fresh perspective. And I think one of the problems we got is the career politicians that look at this as the next rung up the career ladder.
Yeah.
And I think we need good people that have got good experience.
We look forward to having you back. Tom, hang around. We'll do a wrap-up. That coming up next here on KTIA, Iowa. Psst. Let me let you in on a little secret. You ready? Always try to do business with people, not places. Especially if you seek honest Christian business people. And when it comes to my car, I really need to trust who's working on it. Now, my family is so blessed. A few years ago, we found a family-owned automobile repair shop that operates as a Christian business also. Open, honest, reliable, trustworthy. It's AMCO on Hickman Road in front of Kmart. And it's a family-owned Christian operating business. This family treats your car as if it was their car. Everything from oil changes to transmission repair and everything in between. So the next time you feel the need to be at peace with your choice of who you can trust with your car, give AMCO on Hickman a chance to serve you. And tell them Max sent you.
All across America, there are countless numbers of people struggling with addiction and other life-controlling issues. Probably someone you know and love. There is a way out. There is hope. Transformations Treatment Center in Delray Beach, Florida, has a unique approach to substance abuse treatment. Call now and ask about our Guaranteed Success program or log on to transformationstreatment.com. Transformations. Change your life. Change your relationships. Transform your world.
If Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of America was your personal webmaster, Tom would filter out all bad debt emails. If Tom was your mailman, you'd never get any debt reduction junk mail. If Tom Coates was a lineman, he'd block any phone calls offering to reduce your credit card debt.
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America, and we're still your best choice for credit counseling. We're local, we're accountable, and we can do more. You make the call when the time's right for you.
When it comes to competition, there really is none for Consumer Credit of America.
Ten before the top, Salem Radio Network News at 4 o'clock, and then Michael Mudloff. And we'll have Michael on here with True Blue. And Tom Coates in the house. It's a Tuesday, so that means we're talking politics in Mac's World. Ryan producing. This is the third candidate that we've had the opportunity
for U.S. Senate
interview.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to get with Joni Ernst people. Mm-hmm. You have to remember, for those of you that listen, most candidates, and I'd like to say all of them, but that's I can't say all, that'd be wrong. But most candidates would prefer not to come in an open forum like this for 45 minutes and answer questions.
Joni Ernst is the one other one I think is a viable candidate. We ought to try to get her on.
Yeah, and I am talking with her people, and we still have a couple months to do that. We would like to remind you that the group that I have called Testify, which meets the first Wednesday of the month at Incredible Pizza at 86th and Douglas here in Urbandale. For the next several months, we're going to have the candidates come forward, and they're going to give their personal testimony. Tomorrow's Matt Whitaker, and Matt has always been very upfront about his faith and where it lies with him. I think Mark Jacobs was not equally as candorish. Is that a word? Candid. But certainly was not hiding behind talking points like we had with other candidates that we've dealt with over the years.
They just wouldn't answer a question.
Yeah, they just dance around. And then Clovis was on the air with us, and he'll be in at Testify in, let me see, this is going to be March, so he'll be in April, and I believe Mr. Jacobs will be there in May. And for those of us that listen to this program, that's really important. You know, I put something on the Facebook about, you know, does your candidate's faith have anything to do with why you'd vote for him? And one guy who's a good guy came back, because I know him, came back and said, you know, his faith doesn't have anything to do with the office he serves in.
No, I don't believe that.
I don't agree with that.
No, we don't agree with that, Mac.
I don't agree with that.
I mean, I think it starts there. And if you can't get to the spiritual core of a person, how are you going to know what you're voting for if you can't get to that core?
This is not Hawkeyes or Cyclones, folks.
No.
This is spiritual. This is in the depths of the night when things are not going well in life, and you have to surrender wherever you're at and turn to a power greater than yourselves and say, what do I do? As a father, as a mother, as a son, as a neighbor, as a spouse? Well, how about as a U.S. Senator?
I'm partly done. I just got back from my trip last night, Mac, and I'm reading this book on George Washington's Secret Six and the 6 espionage individuals that he counted on to help, and without them, the Revolutionary War would not have been won. Those guys really gave up their lives, their fortunes, their families, and everything else dedicated to a cause.
Yeah.
And the oppressive nature of the British, it wasn't just a small tax that they were going for. After a while, the British became exceedingly oppressive of the U.S. citizens. And they said, no, we're not going to be subservient. We're not going to bow down like other people that, have been conquered people. We're people that have God-given rights, and the freedom that we have defined is one of our God-given rights. And so...
And it's being robbed from us.
Oh, absolutely. And when we've got some, in all honesty, I don't mind saying we've got some godless people that are in charge up there in D.C. now, and not all of them are Democrats. And we need to get some good, strong, godly leadership if we're hoping to hold this republic together. If not, then we've got a short period of time left.
Yeah, because just like other countries, just read history. Just read history to find out what happens when countries turn to the same things that we're turning. It's interesting, Tom, because the corruption and evil and sin that we deal with in the 21st century isn't really much different than the first century.
Absolutely not, Mac. And even prior to that, you go back to the Old Testament, and it's human nature is what human nature is.
That's right. That's right, and we were talking earlier that, first century Christians, we think we're being not prosecuted. What's the word I want?
Persecuted.
We think we're being persecuted. Baloney. We got it easy. You go back to the first century Christians, in between the time that Paul wrote the letters and then Matthew, Mark, and Luke and John came back with the Gospels. Beheaded, shot, or not shot,
well, now
killed,
some of that
stoned, in prison.
Well, some of that persecution is going on today. It's going on in Syria, Libya, Egypt, some of these other countries. There is that level of persecution of some of the Christians in this world.
Is that Frank, Ryan? All right, we'll take Frank for a minute. I don't have the control up here, but go ahead and put Frank on. Frank, you're live with Tom and I here. We literally have 2 minutes, but go ahead.
Quick point. I wanted to address the guy that said their religious is meaningless. The Speaker of the House is second in line to the presidency, and Obama was a senator. So this group of people that we have to choose from, governors, senators, speakers of the House, etc., they all need to voice their views on their personal beliefs and faith.
Were you comfortable with Mark Jacobs' position on faith?
Well, I heard a lot of his fiscal stuff. I was sent an email at the time that I think he was talking about his faith, but I didn't particularly hear it. But I guess my point would be that I think all candidates, and I could probably vote for a Muslim. I could probably vote for a Mitt Romney. I could vote for different people if you know what you're voting for going in. I just don't like this wolves in sheep's clothing. Yeah. You know what you get when you vote for something. And I think it's important for every candidate, no matter what stripe they are, come forward and tell me what you believe and why you believe it.
Well, I would say that Clovis, Whitaker, and Jacobs were all very candid with us on what they believe. Mark was the least forward when it came to the gay marriage issue. He's been trained well. He stopped right after marriage should be between a man and a woman.
I couldn't. Well, what was the guy? I kept pushing. Oh, that was the one guy that you're talking about where I pushed him everywhere I could. Yeah, I couldn't get an answer. I could not get much elaboration on that though, Matt. Could I?
No, he wasn't going to budge. We would have sat here in silence. All right, Frank, I appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Tomorrow's Ash Wednesday, the beginning of Lent. I will not be here for the show. Reich Placix will, as I have responsibilities at Testify over the noon hour. and then 2 big services tomorrow night at Lutheran Church of Hope. Pastor Richard is going to preach on Matthew, and it's going to be, I got a glimpse of the sermon the other day at dinner with Richard, and it's really going to be a good sermon. So, Tom, thank you very much. We will continue to march forward to this primary and see who we're going to come up with when it comes to our possible candidates for the United States Senate replacing Tom Harkin's literally 30-year run. He was elected in 1984, took office in 1985, and his office will run out just short of a 30-year stint. Too long. We need to change that. We absolutely need to get a Continental Congress in this country and start with that change. I think if we could start with...
Well, they would have anointed George Washington as really an emperor, and he stepped down and said no.
Yeah. And I'm afraid Obama is not.
Yeah, I am too.
I mean... Anyway, God bless you. Thanks for listening today. We appreciate you listening. Your comments are always welcome. And today I want you to think of somebody that you don't like, somebody that's wronged you, somebody that you carry a resentment with, and someone you thought you could never forgive. Start tomorrow, Lent, by forgiving that person. Because if we can forgive our enemies, folks, we can certainly love our neighbors. We'll be back.